You walk into a room, and you feel it before you see it. The air is slightly off. Somebody's quieter than usual. Two people are a little too careful around each other. A joke doesn't land quite right, and the silence after it stretches a fraction of a second too long. Nobody else comments on it. You don't comment on it either. But your whole system is already moving. You adjust your tone. You pick a seat that lets you sit between the wrong combination of people. You ask a light question at exactly the moment the tension crests, just enough to move the energy somewhere safer. If someone looks even slightly upset, you start replaying the last few minutes to see whether you caused it or missed a chance to prevent it. By the time you leave, everybody else has had an evening. You've done a shift. This is what this video is about. There's a word people like you use a lot. Empath. Highly sensitive. Intuitive. Sometimes people pleaser. Sometimes eldest daughter energy, even when you're not the eldest and not a daughter. The language tries to get at the same thing, that you are unusually attuned to other people's internal weather, and that you quietly adjust yourself to stabilize it. Most of the time, nobody sees you doing it. They just notice that things go smoother when you're there. They call you grounding. They say you're easy to be around. You take pride in that. You also quietly resent everyone for how much effort it costs. Because underneath the care is something else. A constant, low-level fear that if you ever stop managing the room, everything will fall apart, and it will somehow be your fault. Psychologists call this emotional over-responsibility, the habit of assuming you are responsible for other people's feelings, reactions, or moods, even when their emotional state has little to do with you. It looks like empathy from the outside. On the inside, it feels like carrying an invisible job you never applied for. You are not just aware of how people feel, you feel obligated to fix it, prevent it, smooth it, or at least not make it worse. Every mechanism in this video is a way your nervous system tries to keep emotional weather under control. Not because you're controlling. Because, at some point, it wasn't safe for you to believe the weather would ever be managed by anyone else. Psychologists call this atmosphere scanning, a heightened, automatic monitoring of social and emotional cues in a room, developed to detect tension early and reduce perceived threat. You do this before you say a word. Your eyes are on micro-expressions, tone shifts, energy drops, tiny changes in posture. You notice when someone's laugh is slightly thinner than usual, when "I'm fine" lands half a beat late. You're tracking the entire emotional field, not just your direct interactions. If there's a storm brewing between two other people, you feel it in your body before they have their first real argument. The scanning gives you incredible real-time data about the room. The cost? Your nervous system never gets to arrive as a participant. It shows up as a sensor. Psychologists call this personalization bias, the default belief that if someone is upset, tense, quiet, or distant, you are somehow responsible, or at least should have prevented it. Intellectually, you know other people have whole lives. You know they bring their own stress, history, chemistry to the table. But the second the mood changes, your mind runs through a silent checklist. Did I say something off? Should I have caught that earlier? Did I miss a warning sign? Even when you can identify 100 reasons why their feelings have nothing to do with you, there's still a background story. Maybe I could have made this easier. You apologize before anyone blames you. You over-explain decisions nobody questioned. You take emotional responsibility not just for your actions, but for the entire chain of reactions around you. The personalization creates a sense of control in unpredictable environments. The cost? Everything that goes wrong feels like a report card on your adequacy. Psychologists call this role-locked caretaking, getting stuck in the position of emotional manager or peacemaker in your family, friend group, or team, until it becomes part of your identity. In a lot of families, when tension rises between two people, a third person gets pulled in to stabilize things, what systems theorists call a triangle. Maybe you were the mediator between arguing parents. Maybe you were the hero child who kept the family image intact. Maybe you were the one who calmed the explosive sibling, softened the critical parent, distracted from the drinking. At some point, the system started relying on you to regulate everyone else. You got praised for being mature, understanding, the strong one. You learned that your value was in how well you absorbed, redirected, or neutralized other people's emotions. The role locking gave your family stability they didn't know how to create any other way. The cost: you walk into every new group already reaching for the thermostat. Psychologists call this over-functioning reflex, doing more emotional and practical work than is actually yours, especially when other people underfunction or avoid their own responsibility. The moment someone is distressed, you move. You offer solutions before they finish the sentence. You explain their feelings to other people. You smooth over their conflicts, cover for their missed deadlines, anticipate their needs before they articulate them. You rarely ask whether they're capable of handling their own emotions, because somewhere in you the assumption is, if I don't, no one will. Over time, you become the one who stays late, texts to check in, remembers everyone's triggers and schedules and sensitivities. They get to focus on their feelings. You focus on their feelings too. The overfunctioning keeps systems from collapsing. The cost: you quietly disappear from your own life. Psychologists call this guilt-based boundary collapse, the difficulty setting or maintaining emotional limits because any assertion of your own needs triggers disproportionate guilt, as though you're abandoning your post. When you even think about not answering a 11 p.m. message, you feel selfish. When you imagine saying, "I can't talk about this right now," your stomach drops. You picture the other person spiraling alone, blaming you, deciding you don't care. It doesn't matter that they've handled things alone before. The story is, if I step back, something bad will happen, and it will prove I was never as caring as people thought. So you say yes when you're exhausted. You stay in conversations long after your nervous system has checked out. You let people vent at you for hours without asking whether you're actually available for that. The boundary collapse preserves your image as reliable and kind. The cost: you have nowhere to go when you need the same thing you give. Psychologists call this hyper-responsibility schema, an inflated sense of responsibility for preventing harm, distress, or negative outcomes, often linked with anxiety and perfectionism. It shows up in thoughts like, if I don't fix this, they'll fall apart. If I set a boundary, they'll feel abandoned. If I don't anticipate their need, something worse will happen. These are not rational predictions. They're emotional certainties learned from real experiences where not catching something early did lead to pain. Maybe a parent really did fall apart. Maybe conflict really did escalate when nobody played mediator. Maybe anger really was dangerous. So your nervous system built a rule. It is my job to see it coming and stop it. That rule did make you safer once. Now it turns every minor tension into a potential catastrophe you're supposed to prevent. The hyper-responsibility creates the illusion that you are in control of other people's internal weather. The cost: when the forecast doesn't improve, you blame the sky on yourself. Now put them together. Atmosphere scanning, personalization bias, role-locked caretaking, over-functioning reflex, guilt-based boundary collapse, hyper-responsibility schema. 6 mechanisms, 1 architecture. A mind that learned, very early, that the emotional state of a room determines whether you are safe, and that your job is to keep that state within tolerable limits. None of this came from a book. It came from evidence. From specific rooms where the mood did affect whether you got yelled at, ignored, pulled in, or used as the adult when the adults weren't available. You did not wake up one day and decide to be responsible for everyone's emotional weather. You just never learned what it was like not to be. Here is the reframe. This pattern is not kindness. It's not empathy. Those are in there, but they're not what's driving the bus. What's driving the bus is fear, not dramatic surface fear, but a deep, quiet belief that if you stop managing people's feelings, bad things will happen and you will be the one who failed to prevent them. The point of seeing that is not to shame you out of caring. You are not supposed to become cold, detached, indifferent. The point is to separate genuine care from chronic responsibility. Care says, I notice you're not okay, and if I have capacity, I want to be with you in it. Responsibility says, I notice you're not okay, and now I must fix that or I have failed. One honors you as a person. The other turns you into infrastructure. So, what changes first? Not the scanning. You will probably always walk into rooms and feel the air. That part of you is old and honestly, useful. What changes first is what you do with that information. Right now the chain is instant. Notice tension, assume obligation, start working. The work is to insert one small question into that chain. Is this actually mine to hold? Not, do I care? You already care. Is this mine is different. Sometimes it will be. If you did something hurtful, if you're part of the conflict, then yes, your feelings, your repair. But if two other adults are in a bad mood because of their choices, their history, their patterns, your care does not automatically equal your responsibility. The second shift is learning what healthy emotional responsibility actually looks like. Most frameworks describe it simply. You are responsible for your feelings. Other adults are responsible for theirs. That doesn't mean you never affect each other. It means you stop confusing influence with ownership. If someone snaps at you, you are responsible for how you respond, the boundaries you set, the conversations you choose to have. You are not responsible for fixing the entire chain of thoughts and experiences that made them snap. If someone you love is in pain, you are responsible for being honest about what you have capacity for. You are not responsible for making sure they never feel alone. Healthy responsibility is local. Over-responsibility is global. Local says, this piece is mine. Global says, all of this must be mine or something terrible will happen. The third shift is practicing visible boundaries in tiny places where the stakes are low. Not with the person who scares you most. Not in the most loaded family situation. Start with the friend who texts long voice notes at midnight. The coworker who always wants to debrief for an hour after meetings. Try one sentence that feels almost rude to the part of you raised to be the emotional adult. I care about this, and I don't have the bandwidth to go into it deeply tonight. Notice what happens. Most of the time, nothing catastrophic will. They might be a little disappointed. They might be totally fine. Your nervous system will still react as if you failed them. That reaction is old data. Every time you set a small boundary and the world doesn't collapse, you're collecting new data for a different equation. There's one more piece nobody talks about. When you step out of the weather manager role, systems get weird for a while. Families, friend groups, teams, they are used to you being the one who keeps the storm from landing. When you stop absorbing, the real conflicts, tensions, and responsibilities have to go somewhere else. People may accuse you of changing, of being selfish, of not caring like you used to. What they often mean is, we don't know how to function without you doing too much. That's not an indictment of your new boundaries. It's just evidence of how much unpaid emotional labor you were doing. Letting other people feel the weather they generate is not cruelty. It's the only way they ever learn to carry their own sky. If this video described the way you've been walking through rooms your entire life, there isn't something wrong with you. There is something very right about how closely you watch the environments that shaped you. Your sensitivity, your pattern recognition, your ability to read a room. Those are real strengths. They just got conscripted into a job they were never meant to do alone. You are allowed to keep the radar and put down the responsibility. You are allowed to be in the room without being the room's weather system. If you want more of this kind of psychology, not be nicer to yourself. Not just set boundaries, but precise language for how minds like yours actually work. You know where to find it. Subscribe if this helped you name something you've been too tired to explain. You don't owe every room a stable climate. You are not the sky. You're allowed to walk out of the storm.